Iraqi officials set to meet this week in Washington, D.C. The relationship between the two countries is under strain following last week's deadly strike against an Iranian military leader.
So meanwhile, thousands have flooded the streets of Iran's capital for General Qasem Soleimani's funeral. He was the one killed in a U.S. drone strike in Iraq last week, and with Iran vowing revenge. President Donald Trump said in a tweet, take a look here, that, quote, should Iran strike any U.S. target, the United States will quickly and fully strike back. Meanwhile, last night, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sent a letter saying this week the House will seek to limit the potential military actions President Trump can take against Iran without congressional approval. We want to bring in Brandy on this. There's a lot to really unpack here. Because meanwhile, here in our state, Washington State found itself at the center of national headlines with these escalating tensions with Iran also.
Yeah, so you probably saw these reports over the weekend. We want to try to give you full clarity on them. So the Council on American-Islamic Relations put out a press release over the weekend saying they were assisting something like 60 Iranians and Iranian-Americans who had been detained and questioned at length at the border crossing up in Blaine at the Peace Arch. And so, clearly there was some questions here about what's going on. Are there heightened security measures? Apparently, a lot of these folks had been coming back from an Iranian pop concert in Vancouver, Canada. So we saw members of our state's congressional delegation, as well as other politicians, including the governor, swiftly react to this. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal reacting to those reports over the weekend, saying she was deeply disturbed by them. Saying, I'm deeply disturbed by reports that Iranian Americans, including U.S. citizens, are being detained at the Canadian border with Washington State. My office has been working on this all morning. Please contact us with information on directly affected people. Governor Jay Inslee had also said, look, my office is looking into this. We're trying to figure out what happened. But then he issued a follow-up. I want to read it for you, saying the Department of Homeland Security has informed my office they did not issue an order to detain or refuse entry to Iranian Americans. However, we are continuing to seek answers from federal officials and talk to those caught at the border. And for its part, Customs and Border Protection responded pretty swiftly to these reports because they just went all over the place on social media. They flat out denied that this is something that happened. They said in a statement, social media posts that CBP is detaining Iranian Americans and refusing their entry into the U.S. because of their country of origin are false. Reports that DHS CBP has issued a related directive are also false. So a little bit of confusion there, but it sounds like, as far as the governor's office goes, what they want to do is try to talk to individuals who claim or who told the Council on American-Islamic Relations that they were detained or questioned at length. I mean, the particular concern there is Iranian Americans, folks who have U.S. citizenship, being detained for some lengthy period of time. But you heard, Customs and Border Protection saying unequivocally that didn't happen.
So could there be a logical explanation for those discrepancies?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple things here that come to mind. First of all, there is heightened security at our ports of entry. I mean, we have rising tensions with Iran. They have promised to retaliate. And so you might have a number of individuals who are being questioned for longer periods of time than they otherwise would. Now, that doesn't mean that they were detained or that something unusual is happening. I'll give you an example. One time I was traveling alone coming back from Asia, and apparently there had been an issue with human trafficking, and Customs was looking for females traveling alone coming back from certain Asian countries. I got to see TAC, and they stopped and talked to me for a period of time in baggage claim. So that was unusual, but when they explained it, I understood what was happening. The other explanation here, Customs and Border Protection saw some increased volumes of people just coming back from the holiday weekend. They said wait times over the weekend were much longer than they usually were. They were also low staffed. So you could have both of those things play a factor. But just because you're subject to increased security screening at the border does not necessarily mean that something odd or unusual is happening, particularly given the situation right now with Iran.
All right, Brandy, thank you. And, speaking of the situation that we're following concerning